Thanks, Mo. Thanks, everybody, for having me today. Like Mo said, my name is Dr. Hesham Elsaghabini, and I'm really thrilled to share with you some of our insights at Cambridge, or what we're doing, as the title of my presentation entails, looking at how AI is shaping the future of assessments in general. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really keen to hearing your thoughts and questions as well towards the end of my presentation. So if you do have any questions, please do share them. Without further ado, let me just give you a little bit of background of what I do and what's my area of research. My name is Dr. Hesham Elsaghabini, and uh, I'm the academic lead for assessment and research for Cambridge University Press and Assessment. My key area of specialization is educational inclusion and assessment, and I spent many years doing a lot of research. Well, I have to admit that the last 3 years or 4 years have been really, really exciting. The work that was basically supposed to take place in 10 years has been expedited and condensed to 2 years or three. So it's really, really exciting to share with you some of these insights. Um, I think I've met a lot of people that are listening to me today in various events, various acquaintances, and those basically that attended some of my previous webinars or read some my previous research realize that one of my key passions is how to use technology, how to use assessment as a learning tool and convert that into an inclusion tool. That's really something that I've been working on for many, many years, and hopefully that's the main theme that I will be discussing today. But I will be more specific today, and I will only talk about AI. I won't include other various elements, but I will basically talk about how we at Cambridge, view the use of AI and how we envision our assessments going to look like in a few years' time. No one can basically predict a timeline to these changes, so I'm just going to share with you some of the existing plans that we have and some of the existing pedagogy behind it. And obviously, I'll go a little bit theoretical here. I'll start with some of the key definitions that we have around assessments and what makes good assessments, and then we will talk about the impact of AI on teaching, learning, and assessments. So these are the three things that I will always refer to in terms of the impact: teaching, learning, and assessment. Teaching, learning, and assessment. Each one of them will study its impact. Each one of them is a separate research topic, and obviously we could spend hours talking about the impact on each one of these components. And then we'll look at some of the examples and cases, and then eventually, if you've got any questions or if you've got any points that you would like to add, please feel free to include them in the Q&A section. Um, uh, so, so I think the key thing in my, in my presentation and my research is really kind of monitoring how assessments are changing or have been changing for the past probably 100 years. If you're looking at these changes and these applications, it's been astonishing. It's been an exciting journey for how assessment started. Those that are basically familiar with what Cambridge does, we do have a big range of assessments and qualifications that basically go back probably more than 100 years of age. And the original, probably you'd be surprised to hear that the original assessment or the first assessment that we did was something like, I don't know, 200 or 600 hours, six hours in duration. And it included different parts. And today, when we are talking about technology, we're talking about assessments, high stake assessments that probably 1 hour and a half or 2 hours maximum in terms of duration. And it's been a really interesting debate that I think all practitioners are engaged in, whether it's really the time to move away from the traditional school of thought, for people like us in Cambridge, to something more modern, something more innovative in terms of the use of technology. I started hearing questions like, do we really need schooling? Do we really need to to have formal summative assessments at the end? Do we really, are we guys really going to replace teachers with robots? I was presenting in a conference in Turkey last month, and this is probably one of the key questions that resonated with me. I mean, the job security in education, I think, is also impacting the quality of teaching and learning in the classroom. As a teacher, if I'm worried in the back of my mind that basically I'm going to be replaced by a robot, or obviously I won't be needed anymore, in a few years' time, then obviously that's impacting the work that I do and the quality of the delivery that I present to my students. So what I'm trying to say that there are plenty of debates, plenty of questions around what is going to happen in the near future in such a fast-changing landscape. And I'm sure many people listening to me today realize that basically when the pandemic hit, nobody was kind of ready for it. Nobody was expecting the impact that it did. But ultimately, I mean, personally, I see some positive in that impact of the pandemic, which is changing the perception of the use of technology in learning and how we're viewing that use of technology in our teaching. I published a paper. I was working on a paper with a couple of colleagues a few months ago, and we were talking about the misuse of technology in the classroom, and that's also something that I think is kind of in a lot of people's minds these days. How can we counter these misuses and these kind of manipulations of the system? But the conclusion of that paper was that, exactly like we had any new technology that we dealt with, there are things that we need to do as educators, and it mainly comes down to us in the classroom or in the educational landscape to counter those misuses and manipulations. And hopefully in this presentation, I'll try to shed some light on these ideas and these practices. I'm presenting some quotes from different papers that were published in the past 6 months or a year around technology and the changes in technology. And like I said, it's really an endless debate that took a lot of time and energy. And I think it's an excited one to be engaged in. I think now it is really the time, and conferences like this one are really key to shedding some light on the importance of improving or adding new skills to our portfolio as educators to deal with technology. In this presentation, I'll share with you some of the things that I would recommend teachers use, and some of the options that we have and some of the research papers that we publish to address some of these issues. And obviously, it's not my job really, or anybody's job, to tell you what you should do as teachers. I think our central role is to, kind of create a motive, an extra reason why you should think about your own practices as a teacher and develop those activities, develop those practices. I think the key thing in most of our activities is becoming more reflective in our practice. And being reflective as educators means that technically I see what I do, I assess whether it's working, I evaluate whether it's working or not, and I improve it. Not because I'm not good enough, but because there's always room for improvement. So hopefully, you will find a lot of interesting ideas that will resonate with your own practice. And I will start with really the first idea in my own specialization, which is assessment. What is assessment? There are plenty of ideas that basically we can throw in here to define it. There are plenty of ways where we can explain it. I'll try to summarize some of the key definitions that are published formally. I think the one that I like most is that its assessment is the wide variety of methods or tools that we use in education to evaluate, measure, and document the academic readiness progress, skill acquisition, and educational needs of students. I like this definition because it captures most of the things that I personally care about. Inclusion, responding to students' needs, language acquisition, and academic readiness, and checking progress. These are the key things. And obviously from this definition, we can always kind of distinguish between the various types of assessments, whether these types are to be used in the classroom as informal activities, or at the end of the classroom, or something formal that's given to us to present, something that's more competency based, if you like, as opposed to kind of following a textbook or following a certain set of activities in a specific curriculum. The point I'm trying to make is obviously that although this is a standard definition, but obviously we can, like you can tell from the definition itself, we can derive a range of activities. My key area is how can we take this and use it as part of learning, not to assess learning, but to develop learning. And that's really the key and the underpinning concept of my presentation on my research. In the second half of this presentation, you would see when I talk about AI that my aim is to improve the type of assessment that's used within the session, that's used within the learning process, as opposed to focusing ultimately on the summative component at the end of the course. Obviously, it's inevitable. The culture, obviously, I'm based in Dubai and I do a lot of work across the region. And I realize that, this culture is very results oriented. We always want to see the final numerical result. So to evaluate the progress of my child, I need to see the actual score that they get at the end of the course or at the end of an assessment. Whereas what we're calling for is, well, some sort of a transformation in our own mindset, let alone the activities that we do in education, our own mindset of looking at assessments as learning tools, as opposed to assessment for or of learning. Regardless of how we view assessment, regardless of how we see it, it's always central to the educational journey of learners. Whether we are basically going into the transformative journey of assessment and pushing for a more innovative approach, or we're basically following the traditional methods, it is always a central part of the educational process. And for that matter, we have two important components that I think are key to the success of this journey. There's always a measurement tool, and there is always a human judgment part. I'm sure a lot of people listening to me today would probably agree that no assessment would be valid unless we humanize it. Unless, there is an element of relating it to our own context. Whether this assessment is in the classroom or summative at the end, I think that judgment is an integral part of it. I'll give you a couple of examples. At the University of Cambridge, the Cambridge University Press and Assessment, we have developed various tools, and over the past 3 or 4 years, we've been working really hard in adding AI as a tool that will help us as educators and practitioners in assessments big time. One of our exams called LinguaSkill. I'm not sure if people are familiar with the term. It's a new exam, and it's basically undergoing some transformation on its own right to develop it even further. But the important element, I think the most interesting element in this exam is the marking, the scoring structure. We're aiming with technology to auto-mark all aspects of language assessment, including speaking. The challenge that we face, and obviously because training technology for auto marketing, for speaking auto marketing is such a challenging task. We're starting with, obviously, in the future, you never know what's going to happen or how fast things could develop, but we are basically choosing now hybrid marking, where basically the logarithm and computer and the machine is um, 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 kind of assessing initially, and it's reviewed by an assessor. So what I'm trying to say, these two components are very important for the success of the learning cycle in general. Measurement, having a clear measurement scale, and judgment, having an obvious, well-informed, skillful human judgment in that process. So in order to do this, um, um, cycle of assessment completely, there are various roles that need to be, kind of connected and linked. Because ultimately, um, many of you would probably agree that eventually what we were saying earlier as the various methods of kind of collecting and analyzing and documenting the academic progress and the readiness of candidates is mainly a process of gathering evidence of learning. And for that, we need to have clarity on the role of our assessors. And central to their role is clarity on the purpose of their assessment. Why do you want to assess? I think the starting point of the success of our assessment approach in higher education and in education in general, really, is building the right constructs of assessment. And from the construct, I would be able to devise the best way to elicit evidence in relation to that construct, and the best way to interpret, to provide the right interpretations and the right processing for the information we gather, whether it's for development purposes, whether it's basically to be converted in a numerical scale. But the most important element is identify. After basically we agreed on the whole journey of assessment, the importance and the central role it plays, let's take a deeper dive into what the construct of an assessment is. This diagram shows, obviously a lot of people are familiar with this model of assessment, but I think it's really important to build our the construct of our exams around the learning cycle. And there are three approaches that basically, I'm so keen on presenting. As you can see in the screen, I broke them down into three different colors. You've got the pink, the blue, and the green. And I basically put a straight line to represent the academic cycle, the academic journey of a candidate during a specific course or a specific program or a specific year, whatever the duration of the course of their study is. But we've got a combination of various forms. There are combinations of various forms of assessments that need to be present in any successful learning cycle. As you can tell, we are basically dependent on formative assessment as part of learning. And then we added the interim assessment as the pause in learning to lead eventually to the end of learning cycle for the summative assessment. This is very traditional. And the method that basically we always call for, which is not the topic of this presentation, is to have another component, which is assessment as learning, using transforming formative assessment to a more personalized component that will help students discover learning rather than kind of rather than just absorbing external research. Um, so, so having all these different things in mind, what is the construct of an exam? What is the construct of an assessment? A construct, by definition, is a proposed attribute of a person that can be measured through accumulation of assessment evidence. So it's technically what I aim to do and what type of assessment I need to include to measure it correctly. Whether it's a direct measure, like measuring a distance between 2 points, or an indirect measure, whether something like language acquisition or mathematical ability or things like that. So the construct is a very important term, and that's basically what we directly link with the purpose of assessment. So in a previous presentation, I asked the audience that were listening to me, and if we had more time, if we had the luxury of time, I would have asked the same to you guys listening to me today. However, just for the sake of time, I kind of summarized the key purposes of assessment that we deal with today. Why do we do assessment? A lot of teachers today use it for formative purposes. You devise your own assessment, or you depend on the assessments. If you're teaching English, for example, through a textbook, you depend on the materials that come with the book for formative purposes, to make sure that students are learning, to ensure the progress. But some assessments are used for diagnostic purposes. I am a dyslexia specialist. So one of my key areas is obviously I intervene at certain points to see if there are certain impediments to the learning cycle through an assessment. I've got various techniques, various forms of assessments they use. Some of them are physical, some of them are written, some of them are communicative, some of them are perceptive. Whatever the form of assessment that I find suitable for the case, I always do it. A lot of us basically use assessments for progress purposes to check the progress in attainment over a period of time. Very common as well in higher education, we use assessment for placement purposes or for qualification purposes to see if somebody is qualified or not, or to identify kind of preferences or institutional accountability, etc. I mean, there are various reasons why assessments are really important. And for that matter, I think in this diagram, it kind of relates directly to the points I've been talking about for the past probably 15 minutes or so around the various uses of assessments, which are in my book three. The first one is assessment of learning, which is to demonstrate achievement, and assessment for learning, which is the type of method that we use to give feedback on learning and teaching. And the most innovative of all, that basically I think resonates with a lot of people listening to us today, is assessment as learning, to self-regulate and to critically evaluate your own learning and to promote self-learning discovery rather than kind of dictation, and to promote also learners' autonomy, to give them more freedom. I was engaged last week. I was in a tour in the Levant last week in different countries, and I was engaged in conversations around the importance of high-stake exams as opposed to low-stake exams. And I was making the point that basically in language acquisition in particular, which is my key area, both of them are very important. And the type of assessment that we use is very much linked with what we're using it for. So an exam like IELTS, for example, which is considered a high stakes exam, which is also an assessment of learning, is crucial for a lot of activities. But at the same time, you won't get a high IELTS score unless you do well in the preparation course. And for that, you need to use a lot of examples and a lot of practices to improve and to develop your own knowledge about the exam and about English language proficiency in general. And for that matter, it's really creating a balance between the different types of assessments and what we do on daily basis in our classrooms. Some of these tools are low judgment. I don't really use them to, kind of give any scores, or some of them are embedded in the learning, so if you're using a textbook, the activities that are there to support learning that are not necessarily monitored by a teacher. Some of them are very evaluative. They give you a specific score. So what I'm trying to say is that it's very important for us to think in this simple diagram that I presented here, what type of assessment I'm using at what stage of my learning, of my teaching journey. And for that, we've got 4 key purposes that I think are very important to be remembered all the time before we start talking about other variables that would affect the smooth traditional journey of assessment. There are 4 key components. Please remind yourself of these 4 components of the principles of good assessments. They need to be reliable. They need to be fair. They need to be practical. And they need to be standardized in the order for these assessments to be valid. So I can assess the validity of any assessment through its reliability, its fairness, its standardization, and practicality. And practicality would lead to its impact. The point I'm trying to say is that whatever the form of assessment we use, whatever the format that we are basically trying to build, it's very important to bear in mind the validity argument of any assessment tool, whether it's even if it's a small in-class mechanism that we devise. Are we building reliable assessments, practical assessments, fair assessments, and standardized? And do they have an impact on our learners' lives? And obviously, please bear these 4 elements in mind, because with these, I will basically see how AI is transforming the setup of our construct. Remember, we're dividing the construct of an assessment as a proposed attribute that can be measured, whether it's direct measurement or indirect measurement. So the risks or the threats to the validity is the underrepresentation of the construct, or the construct irrelevance variation. And that includes elements related in not covering enough skills, or these skills are not linked directly with the things that we want to teach. These are the key 2 threats that we always face when it comes to the validity of our assessments. And I think there isn't, in any day in history, perhaps, kind of a more talked about theme than today's AI. And to talk about AI, and I just basically want to build on what we just said. In the future, in addition to the validity, and in addition to the validity structure around the construct of exams, I would add the 3 A's. Assessments need to be accessible, assessments need to be appropriate, and assessments need to be authentic. Remember the 3 A's, remember the validity argument. So we've got 2 important things that basically we need to relate our work to. So in the remaining few minutes that I have in my presentation, I would now kind of link everything I just said around the importance and the value of assessments with the theme of this presentation, which is AI and technology. I said at the beginning that obviously I've got 3 blocks that I have to connect together. learning, teaching, and assessment. Assessment is the linkage. And obviously, we're aiming, we're hoping that we will use assessment as well to connect learning and teaching through assessment as learning. But today, I think a year ago, we were, we were surprised to see this magnificent tool. I'm not sure if you can see it on the screen. I just managed to have a video recorded of the same topic that I'm presenting today, which is the impact of AI on assessment. And it's astonishing because technology in this instant, in this situation, this scenario, is able to communicate with us. And as you can see in this video, I'm just simply typing and communicating, but we will see in a minute what's the type of impact AI has on our learning. So this is an AI-generated statement that I gathered from ChatGPT. When I asked the question of how AI is going to affect the assessment structure that I just mentioned, it gave me bluntly, assess AI personalizes learning, automates grading, provides tutoring, recommends content, analyzes data, and enhances teaching while supporting human educators. And I think this statement is really, really important to build on it. Because the key message here is obviously we're not trying to replace educators. I don't think basically it's part of any provider's philosophy to aim for AI to replace human educators. Because as probably many of my colleagues will be talking about today, there's a very important socio-emotional kind of dimension to learning that I think we cannot exclude from the learning journey. But it's amazing what we can do, what technology can help us to do these days. It's amazing what we have available to us, on demand. But what is the real definition of AI? Obviously, the first thing I looked at is our own dictionary at Cambridge. And I was able to extract few similar definitions. All of them feed into the same thing. But the Cambridge definition of AI is the study of how to produce machines that have some of the qualities that human mind has, such as the ability to understand languages, recognize pictures, solve problems, and learn. And I think it's a very interesting definition because that really kind of summarizes, the key message associated with it. So the key element here is to use the machine that helps in the first instance. And I'm not talking about the misuses of AI. I'm talking about the standard uses of AI, how technology can be used effectively to assist teachers and educators, whether it's through performing tasks related to speech recognition, decision making, translation between languages, etc., etc. Maybe one of the questions that basically we have to ask ourselves is it really the right time to move away from the traditional ideas of giving a textbook to students to read, or a specific essay to do after class, or to come up with new innovative approaches? Something to think about. What I'm trying to say is that although these things that basically we are mentioning are exciting, and a lot of us are worried about how things are going to look like, but the reality of it, that this is not the first time we go through this major transformation, and it won't be the last. Since the 50s until today, there has been massive, kind of changes to how assessment or how education in general is being transformed. From the 50s, with the design of computers and PCs, to the launch of the internet, to generative AI, and how things are progressing to what we see today through ChatGPT. Yeah, so it's a journey that's been there for around almost 100 years, and it's not going to stop. It's not going to basically end here. This is not the end. This is just basically part of that journey. So what I'm trying to say that we always have a fear of the unknown as educators and practitioners because there are plenty of things at stake. Our jobs, our kids, our learning, our cultures, etc., etc. But I think we need to be more positive about the use of these technologies in our classes these days. We need to be more open-minded and we need to be already skill-wise to include them and not afraid of change because this change, I see it very positive. And today, really, the reality of it is that we use AI, particularly, I was a big university and awarding body like Cambridge, for example, in various forms. We use AI to generate questions, randomly. We've got a massive piece of adaptive testing that we are working on, like I mentioned at the beginning, through one of our exams called LinguaSkill. We create marking schemes. We check responses. We draft tools. We create resources. We provide feedback. Auto marking is a massive thing in the work that we're doing. We have revision packs and preparation packages. So what I'm trying to say is that with these various components in mind, and remember the 3 A's and the validity argument, these are really the key two messages that we always want to maintain, whatever, regardless of the tool that's used. So, in ChatGPT, like I was saying earlier, we can do a lot of things. And I was I'm not sure if you can hear my audio, but the reason why I included this short video.
Well, Dr. Hesham, I think you have to share the audio to reshare and
Oh, really?
and check the
Yeah.
audio. Yeah.
I'm not sure.
So you have to click share screen again and share the same presentation. And there's, some boxes to check below. You have to check on the share
Oh,
sound box.
that's fine. Um, I don't think it's yeah. No, what I was trying to say really, regardless of the audio of the video that I wanted to share, and I'm just worried about the conscious of the time really, um, is that technology is so powerful and certain things like these little activities can also make our learning journey more exciting, and it's not something that we should be worried about. A few things before kind of I come to the end of my presentation because I'm looking at the time and still have probably 5 minutes left. um there are plenty of resources that we are so keen on making available to all teachers that are listening to us today. um 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 some of these resources will be very helpful to a lot of teachers cope with with the pressure of change, and how technology is affecting the way we design our assessments. And I think it's really critical to be equipped with these tools. Our aspirations is really to have these various uses developed even further, to develop more personalized and trustworthy feedback given to our learners, and obviously be able to embed assessment in the learning cycle to provide a balance between teacher interaction and student independence. I'm so keen on learners' autonomy. I'm a big fan, and I spend a lot of time researching the importance and the impact of students' autonomy on learners' achievement. And obviously, it goes without saying that the result is always favorable to giving learners more freedom in learning, because because it allows them more individualization. So I just basically wanted to share that we have lots of resources available to understand more of the impacts that AI has on assessment and education. We've got some courses that we devised. One of the key ones that are delivered through one of our networks called Cambridge Assessment Network, Understanding Assessments Practical Course for Teachers, available online. And we've got hundreds of research papers that I would really encourage teachers to explore. And one of the quickest tools that I'm keen on sharing today is something that we are so proud of at Cambridge called Write and Improve. And Write and Improve is a tool that will help teachers check writing skills and provide feedback. It's AI generated, so the feedback that you receive is based on the CAFR, but it's fully automated. It's writeandimprove.com. But I'm also keen on making sure that teachers have the time really to reflect on their own practices. And for that, we've got an interesting platform called the digitalteacher.com. It's the first tool perhaps in your reflective journey. And like I said at the beginning, being a reflective practitioner is a key skill in its own right. Being able to reflect on what you know and what you don't know, and identifying your weaknesses as much as identifying your own strength is a key component for your development. So it's free, it's a free tool, so please feel free to have a browse. It's called the digitalteacher.com, powered by Cambridge. It has a big range of resources and tools. And obviously I would like to invite everybody to take a look at some of the learning resources that we have as part of the learning cycle. And the approach that we developed is exactly the one that I just explained, which is in focusing more on the use of assessment as a learning tool, embedding standardized assessment in the assessment, in the learning journey of a student, particularly when it comes to something important like the language acquisition, is something invaluable. So obviously what we're trying to connect is create kind of this dynamics between learning, assessment, and technology, and creating a unit instead of just looking at these items separately. It's something that complement each other. The only part basically that I still have before I stop in the last 2 minutes of my presentation for questions and answers is to invite you to take a look at some of our research papers that are published over the years. I would strongly invite you to take a look at studies in language testing, one of our journals at Cambridge. They provide, and I selected some of the interesting papers that you could find interesting and relevant to the topic of this webinar. Particularly in the 45th edition of Studies in Language Testing. In addition to that, there are 2 more journals that basically have plenty of resources around the use of AI, one through Research Notes and the other is through Research Matters. They're all available on our website. And that really brings me to the last, I think, 1 minute. Is it 1 minute that I still have? If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I'll take a look at the chat if there are any questions.